Hello and welcome to Spotlight on Local Artists, sponsored by Charlotte County Libraries and History. I'm Judy Domzelski, and today we're visiting with John Shea, local artist. Welcome to our show, John.
Thank you, Judy.
I've known Mr. Shea for many years, working here at the library, and we've had many conversations about all kinds of stuff, but I don't know very much about his art world, so I'm really excited to have this particular conversation today. The main area you work in is pointillism. Could you explain to us exactly what that means?
Pointillism is little dots of color placed on a canvas to make your painting rather than large brush strokes, and there's no blending. Your mind has to blend the colors. Seurat pointed that out to people in a different way. He'd tell them that it was dangerous to stand too close to the painting because of the fumes that would come off of it might be poisonous, and so you need to stand back, and people would stand back, and then it wouldn't just be a bunch of dots. It becomes what it is, or what you intended it to be.
And basically it is part of the Impressionist movement, correct?
It is Impressionism in its most fundamental way. They had rules. The rules were you couldn't blend the colors. You had to just use individual colors. You could mix them however you wanted, but you had no blending. And later some of that changed, but his was purist in its purest form.
And I see the painting behind us, which we're exhibiting today, really does seem to pick up some of those Impressionism techniques. And in our conversation before we got started today, we were talking about that it actually picks up the light and looks differently depending on the outside lighting.
Yes, depending on the lighting, the dots themselves change the feeling of the painting.
Yes, I love that. And the Impressionist part probably is the use of light in the actual painting itself.
That's a pretty good description.
How did you know that this was the technique for you, that this was the one that interested you the most?
Well, I saw Seurat's work in Chicago at the Art Institute and was impressed with it there, and I was painting just regular paintings for the most part, and have for years. But one day I decided I'd do a pointillism, and I sort of cursed the pointillism and swore that I'd never do another one. But they must be addictive because I have like maybe 30 or 40 of them.
What was causing you to curse? Was it the amount of time they took?
Yeah, pretty much. It takes time, and you have to let it dry between each layer of paint that you dot into it, and you don't want to have empty spaces. You got to think in a different way.
Definitely, yeah. Fascinating. You mentioned earlier that you paint in other styles as well. Could you tell us a little about that?
That's just regular styles, and normal painting, like people on beaches. I like beach pictures. It's soothing to your soul, I guess you could say. I did some expressionist pieces when I had dreams after Vietnam that were involved pretty nasty dreams.
Of course.
And I thought if I painted them, they'd go away. Well, they didn't. And when I discussed it with the therapist at the VA, I was told that they won't go away. Don't ever do that. One of those paintings that was left is in the permanent collection of the National Veterans Art Museum in Chicago.
Oh my goodness. That's quite an accomplishment.
It made me feel real good when I saw it hanging on the wall in this museum. At the time it was called the National Vietnam Veterans Museum, but they've since expanded it to all veterans and renamed it.
Can you describe the painting?
There's a bunch of people killing each other.
Oh.
If you really want to see it, you can go on their website in the collections and go under John Shea, and you can see it there. It's titled Absolutely Nothing.
That's the title?
Well, it's from a song, War, What's It Good For?
Oh,
Absolutely
yes.
Nothing. And that was pretty much it.
I'm sure that painting meant an awful lot to other veterans. I'm sure it really applied to them as well.
I had shown it in some shows that they had for veterans in Ohio. Mm-hmm. And people commented about it in the newspaper, that they were impressed by it. Yeah, well.
Was the therapist right? Did you get any kind of emotional, or do you get any kind of emotional relief from painting?
From painting, yes I do actually. She said, paint pleasant things. Listen to pleasant music. Pink Floyd, for instance.
I know.
Pink Floyd, for instance,
yes. Yes, that's a fandom we share, definitely.
Yeah. And I try to do beaches and water and palm trees and things that make you feel good.
Yeah. I think in many ways, though, the paintings that speak to me the most, they don't necessarily have to be warm and fuzzy paintings. You know, if I can sense the emotion that's gone into them, and life isn't always happy, you know. And
oh, that's true.
You know, and if you can channel your inner feelings into a painting, I think that has tremendous impact.
At this point, though, I don't do anything that would make me feel bad, because we tend to hang them in our house.
Yeah. Yes.
And when
true.
you see them every day, you like to feel good.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly right. How long have you lived in Florida?
I'm really not sure. Off and on.
A long time.
Well, in the military, I was stationed in Homestead for about 6 months once. But living here 22 years.
That's a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, lived through Charlie.
Yeah. And survived. Do you have any Charlie paintings?
No. I was all about rebuilding everything that got blown away. I didn't have a studio then. We had a very large lanai, and I could paint on there, and a little tiny Florida room was...
And now the studio is so much better because of the fumes and...
Well, yeah, and I can open it up and cool it separately, heat it separately, or not heat it, or, you know.
Yeah.
Gives me space to work. And my wife does a lot of things there too. She paints.
That's wonderful.
As well.
What type of painting does your wife do?
A lot of abstracts.
Oh. Have you ever done an abstract?
Yes, I have, actually.
Were you happy with it?
They're fun. I may bring one in when I show them.
That would be wonderful, yeah.
I did one from the Tour de France.
Oh my goodness. And in oil?
Yes.
And it was abstract, though?
It's abstracted, yes.
Oh, wonderful.
You can kind of see that there might be a bicycle race, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's a riot or something. I don't know.
So when were you first drawn to painting?
Oh, I suppose about 8 years old.
Really?
Yeah,
You just used to mess around with it?
I did, and when I went to grade school, the art teacher noticed that I seemed to have an ability to paint things. I like painting Western scenes, cowboys and horses,
good.
and those kinds of things. When you're a kid, they were big on TV, so you wanted to paint those pictures. And I wasn't allowed to take art in high school because there really is a difficulty in making money as an artist in the real world. Unless you live in New York City, you'll never make the big bucks.
Yeah.
Or Paris, or London.
Tell us a little about your art training education.
It was at Indiana University Extension in Kokomo, Indiana. And I had 7 years of art training there, and they didn't have a degree program in it, so I was a business major. And then eventually I got promoted, and I've been an artist, doing whatever it took to make a living, to be able to support the habit of being an artist.
A lot of hard work goes into it, definitely.
Yeah, it does.
Tell us about some of your gallery showings or awards that you've won for your work.
One of the pieces was Summer Mood, and was in Punta Gorda at the Art Guild there, and got Best of Show. And it was during the season when there's a lot of people there.
Wonderful.
And so usually there's a lot more paintings in those.
Did you sell that one?
No. People don't want to pay the money that you really think it's worth.
That's true.
So I have a lot of paintings. And if you want to make any money as an artist, you need to have about 50 paintings that you can walk into a gallery with. And if somebody likes to buy them, generally they want inventory to sell. Exactly. And if you go, okay, well, I got these 2 good paintings here, and they go, well, that's not the kind of gallery that makes money.
That's true.
So if I ever find enough of them to go into a gallery and say, here, this is what I got, and shop them until you find one that'll do it.
Perfect. What projects do you have in the works right now? Anything you're working on especially?
One of almost that big in the Summer Mood series was from a photo shoot that we did on the Peace River. A friend of ours has a house on the Peace River, and it was during the winter, and they owned a restaurant called Summer Mood.
Oh, lovely.
And so it was a Summer Mood series, and I have the people wearing nice clothes and posing like the one that won the award in Punta Gorda.
Beautiful. Do you mainly paint from photographs, or do you set up outside?
Generally, I do from photographs. And it's not always what you paint, but what you don't paint, and what you change, and what you don't want from the photograph. You just use what you got.
Yeah, that sounds good. Are there any contemporary artists that you like or are strongly influenced by?
I pretty much like most artists that would influence. I'd have to say it'd be Surratt, but
Yeah,
he's dead.
of course.
And he died a long time ago. He was like 34, 36 years old.
Wow.
And he did all of those paintings in that amount of time. That's pretty amazing. It took him 2 years to make this one big one.
Gosh. Well, no distractions then either, like TV or
Well,
technology.
yeah, and they didn't have a lot of lighting and stuff that we have.
That's true.
And
Yeah, I hadn't thought
in that
of
era,
that.
that's most of them did a lot of outdoor painting.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking that Van Gogh did the same thing, you know, with the oils.
He had his way of doing it, and they're very interested. The paint is very thick.
Yeah. Well, of course, there's a theory when you were talking about fumes from the oil paints that was a lot to do with his mental state.
Could have been. Very easily could have been.
Yeah. Yeah, he laid it on really thick.
And a lot of the painting, the actual paint that they used back then, you can't even get anymore.
Oh.
And some of them were made with poisons.
That's fascinating.
There's some really interesting reds that you can get, but it's poisonous.
Wow.
So maybe Seurat didn't lie totally.
Hope it was a natural death, even though he was so young.
One of the guys I met in the Veterans Museum in Chicago was another artist, and he had this painting. I said, "Wow, how did you get that red stuff?" And then he explained to me how. He said, "Well, it's actually you can't. You have to buy the arsenic separately and make your own." I said, "Well, I doubt if I'll do that."
When you were in art school, what were your influences to make you want to continue in the field?
In school, it was surrealism and Salvador Dali primarily. There were some other surrealists that were quite unusual, and it was sort of the thing that was happening in that particular period. Psychedelic art evolved out of it, and when I was in the military, I had done some paintings on the walls of our club that were psychedelic. That was in the Central Highlands of Vietnam.
Oh, fantastic.
Well, we built a little building, and that was our club.
How many tours did you do?
Pardon?
In Vietnam?
Oh, one. I was there a year and a half.
Were you? Yeah, long enough. Are most of your paintings this size?
A lot of them, yes. If you want to get any kind of detail in doing them in pointillism especially, they have to be large.
Right. Exactly. I can see why that would be. You know, because in here particularly. And I had read a little about pointillism before the interview, and, you know, just brushing up on what it was. And I suppose some of the artists take a focal point and start there. It could be, you know, a circle the size of a quarter, and then work out from that. So how does your technique work?
Well, first I'd draw it on the canvas and then take the broader color and start with that, and then another layer later and filter it down. Sometimes you mix the colors and then you put another color over it and you mix that. It takes a long time, so I keep a ledger of what colors that I'm using.
Interesting.
And I tend to mix up more paint than I really need.
Right.
Because you want it to be a consistent color and not look like, oh, you stopped here and then you had to mix a new one and it doesn't quite match.
And do you hold hard and fast with the rule of no blending in the point?
On the pointillisms, yes. And the regular paintings that I do, I blend them.
Just for a change of scenery, probably. That is absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming to chat.
Well, thanks for having me.
It was a real pleasure. Please stay tuned. Keep your eye on our library homepage and look out for John Shea's art show, which will be coming up here probably next year. Thank you so much for
Oh.
coming today.
Thanks for having me.